Welcome back to the Better Divorce Podcast. And why would you want to listen to the Better Divorce Podcast? Well, if you are in any stages of divorce, listen up. I bring experts in their fields to you right in your lap so you don't have to look further. And today is no difference. If you don't know who I am, my name is Paulette Rigo. I'm a certified divorce coach and a credentialed private family law mediator and the host, yes, of the Better Divorce Podcast, and the owner, founder, and CEO of Better Divorce Academy, and author of the second edition of the Better Divorce Blueprint book, workbook, and audiobook, and soon to be released online course. But enough about me. Welcome to the show, Brenda Bridges.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here with you.
Well, we're going to jump right in, but I want everyone to know a little bit more about Brenda. So Brenda is the force behind Bridging Divorce Solutions. Brenda's journey is nothing short of inspirational. After making it through a harsh reality and the emotional challenges of her own divorce, join the club, right? It's a big club. Get to the back of the line, everybody. It's a big group. We're happy to have you here. She transformed her own experience into a catalyst for change, dedicating her career to guiding others through their own challenges and taking a fresh look at how we go through divorce. Bridging Divorce Solutions is Brenda's vision, a beacon for those facing the daunting world, yes, daunting world of divorce. Her approach balances the financial complexities that often accompany it and the emotions that influence money decisions. Brenda's expertise lies in the demystifying of the financial implications of divorce, ensuring that her clients are well-informed, love well-informed clients, credible clients are the best, and empower them to make decisions that safeguard their future. So, Brenda, let's jump in. Tell us a little bit about your story and why your own experience made you say, hey, I got to help others.
It is not an uncommon story, unfortunately. So I was in a long-term marriage. I like to say that I had a very good life, but not a good marriage. But I was reconciled to that. In what was it, 2013, I believe, might have been 12, I think 13. My husband, who was the breadwinner, lost his job. I had been teaching yoga, and career wise, I had evolved through several careers. I started in marketing, I had my own marketing firm, and then I was at home raising my children, driving them around, doing the mom thing, volunteering. And then as they were getting older and didn't need me as much to get them from here to there, whatnot, then I became certified in yoga and was teaching that quite happily. And my then husband lost his job. And I looked around and went, yoga does not have benefits. Yoga is probably not going to send my kids to college. So I needed to pivot. So I became a financial advisor. And about a year and a half into that, he said he wanted a divorce. So I was in a career that I really didn't elect, I kind of fell into. I loved the numbers of the finances. I didn't like, at least where I was, the sales orientation. It wasn't a comfortable place for me. So I was struggling a bit with that. And then divorce. And the divorce, in my mind, became needlessly lengthy, expensive, contentious, all the things. And there were some really big mistakes, like seven-figure mistakes. And after all of that was done, about a year and a half later, I really just looked at it and said, there's got to be a better way. I don't think, and some divorces need to play out in the legal atmosphere, but most don't. And most people want more to, in my experience, get out on the other side as intact as possible, as opposed to fight to the death and spend a lot of money doing so. Except our system doesn't necessarily support that. So post divorce, I was already a financial advisor, and I'm looking at this going, if I'm a financial advisor and I understand retirement planning and finances and stocks and whatnot, and still there were these financial mistakes made in our process, then what about the people who have never done their finances?
Sure.
What kind of support do they have? So I became a certified divorce financial analyst, which is really a certification specializing in the finances of divorce, which are really different than the finances of planning your retirement, planning for college, estate planning, and whatnot. It's just a different animal. And then I started practicing in that area and realized that, again, in my experience, because that's all I can speak to, it was lacking a balance because we're told often in divorce, think logically, not financially. Just think about the numbers. It's a business decision, except it's not, because it's a really emotional time.
Mhm.
Research shows, I'm sure you know this, that it is one of the most challenging things a person can go through emotionally, second only to the death of a spouse, because you're losing your life. You're losing your connections, you're losing your known, and you're starting again. It's an emotional time. So I didn't think it was realistic to just be expected to make your decisions based on a spreadsheet, and a spreadsheet that you may or may not have a really good grasp on if it's not been something that you've done in your life and or marriage. So then I became a certified divorce coach to try to balance out getting through the emotions instead of ignoring the emotions,
Mhm.
and figuring out when people were inclined to make a certain financial decision, what was behind it, especially for those times when it didn't feel logical. It was really emotionally driven. So to acknowledge that with people as they made their financial decisions. So not just understanding the numbers, but understanding why they felt like they did about the numbers. And then to kind of round out the package for me, I became a mediator. Um, and I, much as you, I work often with people in mediating their divorces. So they're taking control of their decisions for their family moving forward out of court.
Mhm.
And if someone is litigating, then I'll support an individual in helping them with walking the path of divorce and sorting out their financial decisions and what they mean.
Mm.
That is my story.
Well, we all can get it down to a few paragraphs, but I'm sure there was a lot more complexity to it. But thank you for sharing that. It's always um, validating for people to understand that we all have a story. Nobody gets married thinking, "Oh, well,
No.
it doesn't work out. I've got this plan B." Even people that have prenups, and be careful with prenups. They can have holes poked in them. I've had many lately say, "I don't remember signing it. I was under stress.
I did it with Rocket Lawyer.
Understand what I was signing." Every excuse or reason, and I'm not saying they're all excuses, some of them are very valid, but there isn't anyone that I've ever met in my coming up on my own 16, 17 years in this world, that said, uh, maybe they had a little bit of a nervous feeling going into it. What do we call that? Cold feet,
Mhm.
butterflies in your stomach. But I don't know anyone goes into it saying, we'll just get divorced. So we don't plan for it, right? There's just we don't educate. We think all about the bride magazines and the
Right.
wedding, right? The romance of it and the cake and the dress and who are you going to have be in the wedding party and where are we going to have the wedding and are we going to have a band or a DJ and how many people are going to come in? And you get the idea. It's this crazy thing, but not like, well, we really should talk about money and careers and children and the things that are really important, not so much as to where are you going for honeymoon.
Mhm.
Now, options. I love that you mentioned that, but I also love that you mentioned yoga because I had been a dance teacher for
Mhm.
20 years and the most I ever made was $40,000. Now that's a whole nother conversation, and I loved much of what I did. It was a bit of an obligation working for a family business, but I don't know a dance teacher, a ballet teacher, maybe a studio owner, but the COVID thing kind of changed the dance studio industry. But I don't know a dance teacher, a gymnastics teacher, a yoga teacher. You get the idea. That makes a ton of money. Like it's
Mhm.
just not a lucrative career unless you're, I don't know, Rodney Yee or something. I'm gonna you and I can talk
Right.
yoga, but there are a few people out there. The gentleman that married us, we were married on the top of a buttermilk mountain, my second marriage in Aspen by my yoga teacher. So, there are some famous yoga teachers out there that probably do make, but that's like 0.1% of the population, right? I mean,
Right.
the typical salary of that is your 1099, and yes, you get to deduct all of your Lululemon, but it's not really a viable career. Although I did create a yoga teacher training school and an Ayurvedic spa and a yoga teacher training center. And, there are ways to do it. But for the most part, that transition that you said, so with the husband losing the job and then
Mhm.
this career, and it led you to that career. I do see that a lot, that, sometimes we don't choose a career for money, right? We choose a career for passion or purpose.
Mhm.
And then we find out, oh, I really need to support a family, or, oh, I need to support myself. And what am I going to do financially? And that's a really good time to work with a business coach or a money coach, or, you know, a financial
Right.
planner of some level too, because it's really scary to think about, oh, if this marriage is on the rocks, and when the husband says, we need to talk, I want a divorce, that's a really scary conversation to have. And did you make that decision on your own about getting into finance, or did you have any support or advice for that yourself?
I would say I made that decision on my own, and it was really a same day decision. My financial advisor had for a decade been saying, and she was the branch manager of I lived in Illinois at the time, of Illinois, and had been saying, oh, you should do this.
Ah.
Because she would come to our status meetings and I would have my little spreadsheets and ask good questions. And I was very involved in our finances. I
Mhm.
essentially managed them for the family. So I had that seed planted, and I had, prior to my yoga career, been in marketing. But I really felt, as many do, I was almost 50. I felt I had aged out of that career. I had been gone for a while. I didn't have the same context. I didn't personally like the idea of walking back to a position that I had had in my 20s and working my way up again. For me, it felt more comfortable to look at changing careers
Mhm.
and doing that pivot and starting something new.
Mm.
And it's had I known then what I know now, maybe I would have made different decisions, but it led me to where I am,
Mm.
and I love what I do now.
Mm. I've done a presentation called Creating a Career You Crave. And
Hmm.
there's a lot that you just sort of hit on, right? And I know we're going to talk about money too, but careers have a lot to do with money, right? And how you feel about yourself are you willing to be an entrepreneur, or are you more corporate? That's a big.
Yes. Yes. And I think there are a lot of cases where people, like I did, I selected the career, the pivot when he lost his job, because it felt like that's a grown-up job. That's a stable job. That's going to have benefits. And then when I got into it, I really didn't enjoy it as it was shaped. But you can use that, you can balance. Everything is balance. So balancing that fundamental financial knowledge and then moving into a place where I can use it in a way that I think helps people and makes me feel fulfilled in a
Mm,
way that selling annuities did not, is
mm,
a better choice for me. And I
right.
think you referred to like the dance, or those careers that are passion projects, as opposed to safety nets or
Mhm.
a linear line of progression. And I do think that there's a balance out there. Sometimes you need to give it time, sometimes you need to work towards it. Sometimes you really need to think about what you enjoy and dig deep. But beyond the passion project, where do you get fulfillment? How can you find that in a job that will then sustain you? So
Mm.
it doesn't have to be either or. You're either passionate or you're resigned. Maybe you build it over time and you give it time.
Yes, and having that internal knowingness of what makes you tick, and your own demeanor and your personality. Are you cut out for the corporate world? And or are you cut out for entrepreneurship, or is there a hybrid model?
Right.
Maybe you finding something that makes you want to get up in the morning and go to work and serve and help others is not, there's not one path to do
Right.
that. It's really important that you do that early work before you find it, create it, and then go, I hate this.
Mm-hmm.
Yuck. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit to these options you mentioned. And many professionals in the divorce world have acronyms after their names, right? So you've got the CDFA, and I work with a ton of them, Certified Divorce Financial Analysts, and of course, Certified Divorce Coaches, and then mediators who really don't have acronyms other than ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution. But there's many different paths of becoming a mediator. Some of them are ex-litigators. I've even seen some
Mm-hmm.
ex-judges. I've seen some from the mental health world
Right.
that come in from a more psychological, mental, emotional background and more that experience and perspective. And then others come in from the financial point of view. So, finding the right professionals to work with that have the right credentials that jive with you are super important too, not just taking the recommendation of a neighbor or a friend or a
Right.
relative. Or, well, Aunt Sally used this attorney, so I'm going to use her or him. And this professional worked for this friend I know. It's also very location driven based on what professionals can work anywhere in the country or the world, and others, nope, like a realtor, they can only work in a certain area. So that's really important too. But you have lots of hats. I have lots of hats. But most people don't know that there are options. I didn't. My own personal experience of an 8.5 year fully litigated divorce case that included a 12-day trial that took place over 9 months. And there were 2.5 years of preparation to even get to the trial. And then after the trial was over and there was a 9-month deliberation for the judge to make his decision, there was an additional 4-year state Supreme Appellate Court position.
Yeah,
And
it just
that's
makes me want to
really rare. I know, which is why I got thrown into this work, because thousands of people, over a decade, literally letters, phone calls, emails, social media. I won't bore you with the methods in which people found me. Sometimes it was just a coffee shop bump in with like a friend from third grade that was like, oh my God, are you okay? But I didn't know that there were options, right? I just thought maybe tried mediation and then it fails and you go on. And but whatever. Part of one of the things I'm so passionate about is teaching people that you have options and you've got to pick the right methodology that works for you, right? So talk a little bit about your experience with options.
I'm a proponent of, you'll see in social media when someone finds out they're having a divorce or they're going to go through a divorce or they're contemplating divorce and they post anonymously. The first thing they say is, I need a lawyer. I need the best lawyer. And
Right.
I am in strong disagreement with that. Yes, you need a lawyer, but you might only need a lawyer for paperwork, or you might need a very strong litigator. But until you do the work to figure out what you actually need, you don't know.
Right.
And you can end up getting yourself in a situation that's much costlier and lengthier and
Mhm.
more aggressive than you intend just by doing that. So I think the first thing to do is get smart about what you want. Because if you don't know what you want, if you don't know what your goals are, if you don't know what best suits you, how are you going to find it? Like you said, Aunt Sally used this attorney. Well, what if Aunt Sally is in an entirely, and she probably is, entirely different life situation than you are? Is
Right.
her attorney best for you? Don't know. Is her process best for you? Don't know. So I think the first thing is you figure out your goals. Do you want to have a relationship with your ex post divorce or not? Do you want to have a really strong co parenting or do you want to have parallel co parenting? How important are the finances? What's your grounding in the finances? Do you want to work if you haven't worked? And that's really appealing to you. Are you scared to death about going back to work because you've been out of the workforce in a long time and you're afraid that you're going to be eating cat food and wheeling your belongings around in a grocery cart? What do you want? and what are your fears and what are your goals? First step. And if you can still talk to your spouse and your goals are just to move on through this divorce process as intact as possible, then probably mediation or collaborative process, if available in your area, are really good solutions for you to investigate. If you run out and you hire a person, an attorney who litigates and only litigates, you've taken that off the table
Mhm.
because you weren't matching your goals and process to the professionals you hired. So first, know your options. There are different ways to go about divorce. You have to look at your jurisdiction because every I read something recently, and I'm not going to have exactly the right number, but it was something like 3,500. And it said there are, say, 3,500 different ways to divorce in the United States because there are 3,500, again, not right, but close, different counties. And everyone handles divorce a little differently. Every
Mhm.
state has their own legislation and own rules. They may or may not have a waiting period. They may or may not require mediation. That mediation might have different shapes, and so on and so on. So you got to first look at where you live and what the rules are there, because that's what applies to you. I recently had a couple I mediated for, and as we were going through their process, they hadn't lived in, I'm in Tennessee, they hadn't lived in Tennessee long enough to get divorced in Tennessee. So they had to wait until they had a residency requirement met until they could file and then they could get divorced.
Mhm.
Little things like that are going to impact how you walk down this path, but getting the information you need at the beginning about what you want, what the rules are where you live, then allows you to find the professionals that support those things. And you mentioned, you have mediators who might be financially based, they might be mental health based, they might be legally based. Even picking a mediator that has the best background for you, if parenting issues are what you see are going to be the most difficult to contend with from more of an emotional mental point of view, you might want a mental health professional as your mediator as opposed to a financial person,
Right.
and so
Yeah.
on.
Hmm.
And I think once you do all that, then you make your team and then you start the process, always keeping in mind what your goals were, what you want your life to look like when you're done.
Right. In my book, Better Divorce Blueprint, I list every conceivable professional you may or may not need, and just understanding who they are, who you may need based on the criteria of your case or
Mhm.
situation, and then interviewing them. It's like a little bit of a job interview. Remember,
Yeah.
you're the client, you're paying them. This isn't a favor.
And
Um,
don't you find that often that role is reversed,
yes, I
where
say.
the clients are treated as though they are employees, essentially?
Mhm.
Back
Right.
off and let me do my thing.
Hmm. Don't
That-
bother me. I know. Why are you asking me questions? I can't be
Yeah.
bothered with this. Yeah, I do get a lot. And this is, I wear different hats because when I'm coaching, I'm not mediating. When I'm mediating, I'm not coaching. That's not to say that when I'm mediating, I don't use my coaching skills. And when I'm coaching, I don't use my mediation knowledge, but they're different lanes. And that's important too. Uh, Especially at the work I do for Divorce Right, because I have to take an employee of a corporation, understand and litmus test and assess their case, and then match them to the right professionals based on
Mhm.
how contentious or amicable or uncontested the case is.
Right.
And I always say it's amicable until it's not, right?
Right.
It's uncontested until it's not. Many times picking the method of divorce, DIY, that's always an option too for some people. Not very many, but it is an option.
Mhm.
And three forms of mediation, court appointed mediation, private mediation with attorneys present, private mediation without attorneys present, and then collaboration, as you mentioned. Not every, some people don't like, what the heck is that? Other states, it's like, they're giving it out like lollipops in the bank. Everybody collaboratively divorces. Whereas in some states, you're like, I don't know what that is. And
Yeah,
then
and some
there's,
it's not available, some it's not on
right,
the books as a law.
right.
Um, yeah,
And
it's
arbitration too. That's an option for some, and some situations where they really don't want to go into that public realm, but yet it's not a very complex case, or they already have a prenup or a postnup, or they just, either celebrity or politicians and want to keep their private life private. And then there's good old fashioned litigation, right? Where we just assume, well, lawyer up and discovery and plaintiff and defendant and interrogatories and, well, let it go. But I think you mentioned a little bit about what kind of relationship do you want to have with your spouse. Now,
Mhm.
we can have a fairy tale idea of what we want the relationship to be with our spouse, but then we can have the reality of what we have as a relationship with our spouse and how much emotion is attached to that. And that can sometimes dictate the form of divorce or the method of divorce that you
Mhm.
need, in categorizing all the elements of your case with legal and physical custody, child support, equitable division of marital assets and debt, and is this a case for alimony? And then just having those conversations. If your spouse will not have conversations about any of or all of those, then you're starting to work slower towards the litigation conversation.
Right.
Although all of those things can be worked out and successfully in mediation. I have one today at 4 o'clock and one tomorrow at 9 a.m. So it's just a matter of doing your homework.
Right. And matching what you need to your situation. You mentioned DIY. Sometimes people should absolutely DIY as opposed to an attorney. I've had, like, recently a young woman called me. They had been married less than a year. They didn't live in the same jurisdictions. They had no shared assets, no children, no house. In my mind, there is no reason not to DIY that, pay the court filing fee.
Right,
There's nothing to unravel. In other cases, when it's really complicated, and in some states, you can't DIY if you own a house or have retirement assets.
right.
So, matching the process to your particular situation,
Hmm.
super important,
Yeah.
because they could end up both hiring an attorney for $5,000 each as retainer when they really didn't need it and there's nothing to decide.
Mm. So well said. One of the things I love that CDFAs and some of the ones I've worked with will look at a situation or based on the marital balance sheet and the domestic relations financial affidavits, put together all these different scenarios, right? Of like, if this is the settlement agreement, there's a 70% chance or propensity that you will never run out of money. And if scenario B, if this is the divorce settlement, there's a 40% chance that you'll never run out of money. And in scenario C, I don't know if I've ever seen a 100% chance, but 95% chance that you'll never run out of money.
Right.
Different ways of seeing divorce settlements with the home, everything from liquid assets like cash, checking, savings, even a vehicle if there's no loan on it. Haven't seen that lately. I see people with bigger car loans that make me want to throw up. Pardon me, we're friends now, but like, really, you're paying $850 for a truck? Like, what are you crazy? But that's just my personal opinion. I bought a $13,000 Mini Cooper cash and said,
I have a Mini
done.
Cooper.
I love them. I'm never driving a car with a car payment. I'm just not. Anyway, it's crazy. And then looking at that, marital balance sheet and creating those scenarios, that isn't my expertise. I could probably never do that. Not would I want to do that.
Well,
I
we do what
cannot
we,
stand Excel spreadsheets. They make me want to throw up. So, yeah, so tell me a little bit about that, because a lot of people ask me, like, what's a CDFA? Like, what's the benefit? How much do they cost? What do they do? And
Mhm.
what is the perfect client for you with that?
So I actually use a specialized software called Family Law Software that's designed for divorce. And process wise, and this is going to be really nuts and bolts because it depends, everything depends. We're looking at what you have and what you owe maritally, what's separate property or not, and how we define that, because it's different in different states. But if you came into something with, it came into the marriage with something that might remain yours regardless of divorce, we have to look at the different rules. And then we're looking at your expenses moving forward individually. What's it going to cost you to live a decent standard of living? And then the income for the family, what's coming in. And we take all of those things and sort out how is it going to look for both of you with child support, with alimony, spousal support, or maintenance, whatever it's called where you live. Um, as you move forward. Are you going to be okay? Are you not going to be okay? And sometimes that really helps people reach agreement when they look at this person who they once loved, they married them, and they see that in 3 years, they're going to be dipping into their retirement funds. And in 5 years, they're going to be broke, even if they earn at their capacity. Then sometimes, oftentimes, that leads to a better discussion about how people are going to end up afterwards, because we're looking past that date of the divorce and into the future and taking that into account financially. Flip side, it can also help people who are we call them often economically disadvantaged. So the lower earner or someone who's been at home and not earning. And if we're able to say, like, look at these figures, you're going to be okay, then they're better able to accept a settlement, being able to see how that plays out instead of, no, I need more, no, I need more, no, I need more. And
Mm.
then we're taking the discussion out of a win lose. What is winning? 52%? Why? Because it's bigger than 50%? Well, maybe, maybe not. And we're putting it in the scenario of, how is your life going to look down the road? Are you both going to be okay? And giving the numbers to support that. We're also looking for pitfalls where, because the finances aren't the specialty of the attorneys, I've seen, Georgia was a state, I saw this recently, where an attorney drafted a document, and the woman in this case was a friend of a former client of mine who said, "Oh, you should just have Brenda look at that." And I looked at their drafted document right before they were filing, asked a couple of questions, and they had drafted an agreement that couldn't be done. And if that had been filed, that would have been it, the agreement. And they're back in court. This was worth about $300,000 to the wife in this case, where they had agreed to split a pension that couldn't be split. So a CDFA is looking for details like that. We're
Mhm.
looking for future forecasting, so you know what those finances really mean to you. And we're looking for potential mistakes where, even though you agreed in spirit, it might not be doable in fact.
Mm. Yes, very true. And you need that financial expert to decipher, dissect the ramifications, not just, oh, like you use that example of, oh, that type of particular type of pension isn't shareable or splittable,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Or the tax ramifications of separating some sort of funds, whether they be retirement, 401k, et cetera, et cetera. They're all going to be different. So knowing that if you split this, then this is the ramification. If you split this is the ramification versus, cash is easy. If there's $1,000 in the checking account, you go down to the bank and, withdraw 500, even Steven, right? So not everything is that simple. I see one of the big problems too with agreements is, one person gets very attached to the marital home. They think the sheetrock is like, very, it's everything, and this is where the children grow up, and this
Right.
is where we brought the babies home from the hospital, and where the Christmas tree went, and that
It's
it's
just,
just
you can't
very.
get your house. So, so
Yeah.
if you can't afford to keep it, then that might not be your wisest decision.
Well, and then they just want everything to be able to afford to keep it. So they'll agree to keep it, and, well, you can keep it and refinance it and, pay me over time. But that person hasn't been in the workforce. And even
Right.
though maybe a judge has awarded that person the home, they go to refinance, and the mortgage company, I don't want to say laughs, but denies that because they're not eligible for that.
Mhm.
And I always bring in a CDLP at that point too, a certified divorce lending professional. So making sure that the agreement is written so that everything in that agreement can actually happen.
Right. And there can be times when our work means sometimes we can find things that are very supportive and innovative, and, oh, that's a different way of looking at it.
Hmm.
Here's this issue, and here's how we solve it financially, because we're weaving a financial story, and those days are great. And there are other days where you look at someone's prenup, and they signed a quit claim already. A quit claim is what gives up right to the house that they're on the title for. for whatever reason, you look at the pattern that's been laid out, and the only advice you can give someone is move on with your life, because there's no thread to pull here. Or I've had this really recently. The individual said, you said it in earlier in our conversation, they didn't realize what they were signing. They didn't know the ramifications. They did it through Rocket Lawyer. So their current lawyer thinks that they can appeal it. All fine and good. But then you walk down the path of what happens then. And in this particular case, even if the prenup was disregarded, this individual's financial situation wouldn't be better. In fact, it would be worse. So it was better to adhere to the prenup because of the way their property laid out. The spouse had inheritance money that couldn't be touched. It was separate.
Right.
So by nullifying the prenuptial agreement, actually made the other party's retirement shareable, whereas it wasn't, and they had greater retirement. So you're kind of switching the lens up and letting people know if then, if then, if then. Where the attorney in this case is like, we're going to get that prenup thrown out. I'm like, well, maybe not. Don't throw it out, because financially you're worse off throwing it out, and you're not well off with it. But you're going to take bad and make it worse, and you're going to spend all that money in legal fees. So we're looking at things like that for the particular person's, parties, situations, to make sure they just have the information and make their own choices and know what happens.
Yeah, having a deeper understanding of the three categories of what is premarital, what is non-marital, and what is marital. I think
Mhm.
every, I don't know, I'm going to say high school junior, maybe senior, before they go off to college, fall in love, get engaged, and get married at whatever age, whether it be 25 or 40, really needs to understand that marriage is a legal binding contract. It's not just about a romantic notion. So,
Right.
it is very key that you understand the nuances behind it. So,
And those prenups, like I was asked recently, I was doing a workshop on wealth management and was asked by someone, their daughter was getting married. What is the best advice I could give them? Well, stay involved in your finances and get a prenuptial agreement.
yeah,
That being said, you can always change that prenuptial agreement and have a postnuptial agreement
true.
as your financial circumstances change. And if you're still on good terms with your partner, there is no reason not to revisit it. You're not stuck with what you agreed to 10 years ago necessarily.
Hmm.
And if it puts you in a really detrimental position, then you need to revisit it. And if your spouse doesn't want to revisit it, then you might have some serious questions to ask about how your finances are set up.
And perhaps you don't get married or you don't sign it, but
Right.
that's
There,
another conversation, right? So,
there is that option.
as us wise old women, I'm speaking for myself, not you, Brenda, can look back at things, judgments that we made at the ripe old age of 17
Mhm.
or 22, 23 years old and go, what was I thinking?
What
So
was I
we
thinking?
don't always know what we're thinking when we're young and we are naive and trust the world. So I
But
thank you
that's
for
another,
this.
oh, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
But
no, it's fine.
that's another point. It's never too late.
Yes.
Wherever you are or someone you love is, it's never too late to get involved in your finances, to
Mhm.
know your situation.
Yeah.
And even those who are happily married and intend to stay happily married, the likelihood that you'll live alone as a female for at least 8 years, even if you're happily married, really high.
Yeah.
So maybe you never divorce, but you become widowed. You're still
Sure.
going to be in charge of that money. So knowing where it is, good idea.
Yes, I'm happily remarried, almost 6.5 years now, and we, both came into this from a collaborative experience. I made the mistake in my marriage of, you know, being busy with the children and hands off and sort of hands on, but then sometimes hands off, and kind of trusted the spouse to do the right thing, and vice versa. Being young and stupid, call it that, naive, ignorant, and
We're
and
busy
having
doing other
a
things.
mindset. Yeah, busy doing other things. Amen. I definitely was busy doing other things. And that's very different, when you get to be, my divorce educated me about anything and everything about divorce, and having now I know, we know where every penny is, where it's, what's coming in, what's going out, how we're going to live that. He's 5 years older than I am, although both of his parents lived to be in their mid 90s. So not bad track record, but I'm counting on it. I always say, when you're dead and buried, I'll be, living with my 7 girlfriends in a commune somewhere, in probably Belize or Costa Rica, or
Oh, I'll visit you.
yeah. Who knows, at the ripe old age of 92 or something. Yeah, you do have to have a plan. It is true, ladies. We are going to outlive, although I have higher blood pressure and higher cholesterol than he does. So a lot of it is genetic. So thanks, Dad, the Irish Catholic, English blood, you get what you get. So, well, thank you for this conversation, Brenda. It is so important that people go into divorce educated, prepared, wise, aware, and confident, understanding that you have options, that there is help out there. Don't go it alone. Get the right support. I always offer, short consultations and assessments for people who really just need to get their ducks in the row and understand what options, and having the right CDFA on your team is so important. What is the best way for people to find you and work with you and learn more about you?
Oh, thank you. My website is Bridging Divorce Solutions. On the website, I offer a free discovery call. You can just click the button and set up a call, or there's one of those little bot chat things that if you have a specific
Mhm.
question, put it in, we'll get back to you and answer it. I also have a book. It's available on Amazon, and that is called "Oh Shit, I'm Getting Divorced: The Guide to Keeping Your Dignity and Dollars." The name
Great
it started out as How to Divorce with Dignity and Grace, which did not resonate. So we had to change it and did some research. And what resonated was, oh shit, I'm getting divorced. So that is now the name of the book. So that is kind of what we talked about, the very beginning of the process when you're thinking about it, just spelling out your choices and options and walking you through how to figure out what's best for you. So that is also available.
I love it. It's a great title, and I'm going to add it to my books are over there, but I do have a ton of them. It's important to have a lot of resources. So good
Mm-hmm.
job. Thank you, everybody, for this conversation. You know how to find me. It's just Paulette at betterdivorceacademy.com. I go to the website, and I have a chat bot too, but it's somebody there that's there 24/7 if you have a question, and it's a human. It's not a chat. It's actually a real live human. So they call me immediately. Thank you again, Brenda, sharing your
Thank
story,
you.
being willing to help people. It is so important, because I know, 20 years ago, 15, 16, I forget how many, it's a blur. When I started to think about this, I was so afraid and so alone and so confused and overwhelmed. And I made so many pathetic mistakes. So a couple
Me
good
too.
ones. Join the club, right? So we don't want you to be that person. So until next time, we'll see you next time.